Hello, thank you for coming for our panel. My name is Tal Schneider. I'm a diplomatic and political correspondent for Globes. And let me invite the panel participants. Mrs. Dr. Anita Freedman. Dr. Anita Freedman is the Executive Director of Jewish Family and Children's Service in San Francisco, the Peninsula and Marin counties, one of the largest and oldest family service institutions in the United States. JFCS programs are internationally distinguished for their excellence, innovation, and compassion. As a speaker, lecturer, and author, Dr. Friedman expertise includes social policy programs for diverse population, including children's, youth, families, and the aged. Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt, please, is the chief rabbi of Moscow and head of the Rabbinical Court of the Commonwealth of Independent States. President of the Conference of European Rabbis. Rabbi Goldschmidt is the first president of the Conference of European Rabbis from Eastern Europe in the organization's 54 years history. Previously a visiting scholar at the Davis Center, Harvard University. He takes an active part in interfaith dialogue gathering with Christians and Muslims and has spoken in major events in DC, in New York, Paris, and many other places. I will not go through the entire bios of all of you because it's so long. Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman is the president of Yeshiva University, a gifted leader, scholar, and orator. Dr. Berman has a deep understanding of Yeshiva University and its unique culture after graduating with distinction from 4 of its schools. Dr. Berman earned his BA from Yeshiva College, his MA in medieval Jewish philosophy from Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies, and his rabbinical ordination from the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary. And everybody here are doctors except me. Member of the Knesset, Dr. נחמן Shai, please, is the chairman of the lobby for strengthening the Jewish people. Dr. Shai is a member of the Knesset from the Zionist Union Party. Prior to entering politics, Dr. Shai had a distinguished career in both public service and private sector. He held numerous positions, including press secretary of the Israeli delegation of the United Nations, press officer at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., communication consultant to the Minister of Defense, commander and chief editor of Army Radio, ADF spokesman. There's so many more here in Channel 2 and more. We'll just stop here. And the dear Ambassador Ron Purcell, the head of Abba Eban Institute for International Diplomacy at the Lauder School of Government Diplomacy and Strategy here at the IDC in הרצליה. The former Israeli representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Purcell, is also a distinguished fellow of the Hudson Institute. And of course, he served as the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and as Israel's very successful ambassador in the UK. And I will take my seat as well, right? This is my seat over there? So thank you all for coming. Okay. Thank you all for joining us for this very, very important panel. And thank you, IDC, for inviting me over. It's great to be here. Very crucial times. And a lot of headlines came out from here yesterday and today. So it was very interesting as a reporter to follow whatever is being said here. But we will focus not on the very much into-the-minute current affairs, but on the current affair of the Jewish people. And as I told you in advance, I'm going to open with something from the recent events. An event that, to my opinion, put together some of our problems between the Jewish people that live in Israel and the diaspora. We do have, I'm sure you're all following in the recent years, many Israelis that were born here or raised here or moved to the States or elsewhere when they were young and became very successful in arts, in high tech, and leaders of their communities. And one of those events, we were supposed to have Natalie Portman, a former Israeli, receiving the prize this May, I think, and with her claim that she doesn't want to be here, getting this prize on one stage with a speech of the Israeli Prime Minister, she actually very much insulted everybody here in Israel up until the point, where up until then, everybody here really adored her. And I thought this little occurrence kind of presented some of the challenges that we face today, Israelis and our Jewish diaspora, with putting together events or ceremonies and occurrences that may hail or praise our Jewish leaders around the world, and also try to bring into Israel the youngest Jewish to be interested in what's going on here. And apparently with this this little affair, she just, kind of, it's blew into our face. So I will actually start with the Rabbi Goldschmidt, who knows much about behind the scene maybe a little bit. And I urge you all, I'm going to take some time to make sure that everybody gets an equal time, but kindly when you answer, how do we face a problem like that when young Israelis or young former Israelis heard the connection between us and the diaspora? And you can also take the time to talk a little bit about your own where you're coming into this subject from your own perspective, but please do not go over time.
Okay. I think that what happened with Natalie Portman basically is a symptom of the political divide between much of diaspora Jewry and the Israeli government. The Genesis Prize was created by the Alpha Group, by Michael Friedman and his partners, who are members of my congregation in Moscow, in order to bring together the diaspora Jews in the periphery with the state of Israel, with the government of Israel. And it's not the first time. It's the second time that Sir Kapoor, who received the prize last year, who decided that he doesn't want to receive the prize from the hands of the Israeli Prime Minister. So this is a symptom of the growing divide between Israel and the diaspora. I just want to give you one of the great American Jewish leaders asked me, tell me, how can I influence Israelis to accept a two-state solution? And I said, listen, American Jewry tried to influence Israel to give them 1,000 square meters next to the Kotel, and they couldn't do that. So how do you think the Americans will be able to influence Israelis to give up half their country? But it is not only Israel and the United States. Speaking as a European, as the president of the Conference of European Rabbis, I would like to bring two examples. One example happened a few weeks ago here in the Knesset when one of the members of the Likud came with a proposal that Israel should start working with extreme right parties in Europe, which the local communities shunned, and the local Jewish community of Vienna came and said, under no way we're going to work with a party which was founded by an SS officer. And the last example is that which happened yesterday at the legislation committee in the Knesset, when we, the Conference of European Rabbis, we proposed a law to help chained women, agunot, outside of Israel, to help, because Israel is becoming much more important for diaspora Jews, to help them to convince their husband to give a get, a Jewish divorce. And some Knesset members of Nashdom Israel, our home Israel, said, oh, they didn't even understand, they didn't even speak to us, they didn't even speak to diaspora leaders. So these are four examples where we see the political divide between Israel and the diaspora, which I think is becoming a growing problem.
But how do you solve that? What is your opinion on how to proceed with, maybe the prize, you said it's the second time that it's happening to that specific prize, and that's got a lot of headlines. Maybe the entire concept wasn't the right one.
I think that we have to start talking not above each other's heads. We have to start talking to each other. We have to recreate some platforms where we can not only talk to each other but also hear each other. It's something that Jews have a very difficult time to do in general.
Okay. Dr. Friedman, coming from the West Coast, where Israel gets maybe with the Jewish population in California, and I know that personally, is much more critical of Israel, both in San Francisco and maybe in LA as well. Do you see the rift, and how do you think it can be solved?
Well, we saw the rift on this issue of Natalie Portman.
Maybe speak up.
I saw the rift with this issue that you raised about Natalie Portman, because the people who share her views liked her, and the people who did not like her. And she was canceled out by Gal Gadot, who is a champion for Israel. So it didn't really change the fact that people have a lot of ambivalent feeling about Israel. In the United States, and I don't think we can really talk about the diaspora so much as we can talk about different dimensions of the diaspora. In the United States, which is one of the largest Jewish communities in the world, there are two major centers of gravity now, Israel and the United States, of course. I can tell you a little bit of what I see in a few capacities. One is I am the executive of an organization that is probably the largest Jewish organization in California, and I see the internal workings of 80,000 Jewish families every year. I'm also here in the capacity of the president of a large philanthropy that funds Jewish causes, and I can tell you a little bit about what we see. The issue of ambivalence about Israel is not new in the American Jewish community. Many American Jews didn't even support the establishment of the State of Israel. This is not a new phenomenon, this issue of ambivalence about Israel, those people who see being Jewish as a religious identity sometimes are less supportive of Israel than those who see it as a national identity, as a people. We know that. Support in the American Jewish community overall is still approaching 70%, and that's true for Americans. But when you dig a little deeper, the big problem is with young people. Well, we have a research question that we ask, and this is the research question. If the State of Israel no longer existed, would you consider it a personal tragedy? For people who are 55 and older, 75% would consider it a personal tragedy. But for people who are 35 and younger, only about 35% would consider it a personal tragedy. That statistic alone tells you what the problem is. Because there are three things I think that really need to happen. In the American Jewish community, which is an entirely different culture, living in probably the best conditions that Jews have ever lived in, where we're surrounded by people who love us, rather than being surrounded by people who hate us, it makes for a different kind of human being. And so in the United States, being Jewish for younger people is a lifestyle choice. And that's connected to their support for Israel. So it's essentially a lifestyle choice in the United States. So the big challenge is the drifting apart between the American Jewish community and future generations in Israel. That is an existential threat. That's really the big issue.
So taking from what you just said, and Dr. Berman, I'll turn to you. History teaches us that only after following some huge mass tragedies for the Jewish people, we are getting a better maybe sense of urgency, sense of need to have a Jewish home, or maybe a sense of better connections. We don't, as Israelis, we've been taught in the last maybe decade not to talk about Aliyah as a must anymore, but then come out and say, when there is a Jewish tragedy going around the world, then people are, their sense of Jewish community becomes stronger, and then they run to the synagogue, they run to the community centers, but we don't want to wish for that.
Right.
So how do you?
So let me first say that it's my honor to be sitting amongst these distinguished panelists, and thank you so much for inviting me. And place your question in the context of the earlier remarks of Amos Gilad about the strategic threat of the separation of American Jewry and Israel, and Irina's impassioned and important remarks about the crucial need for solidarity amongst the Jewish people. And part of this issue, not to wait till we get to wartime conditions, is to diagnose the problem correctly, as Dr. Friedman mentioned to me earlier, and started touching on a crucial point, which is Jewish identity today amongst the young in American Jewry is fundamentally different. It's not high up and how they identify themselves. It's not something that's important to themselves, and as such, Israel naturally is not as important to them. But I think that there's another issue that's important to bring to the table, which I find is often overlooked. And that is the very definition of a modern democracy is different in Israel than it is in America. There's a fundamental difference in how we understand the purpose of a democracy. And this difference cuts along the lines of a distinction by famous American historian David Hackett Fisher, who distinguishes between two words, liberty and freedom. Liberty means the ability to live unencumbered by other people. Nobody will interfere with your life. You can live as you want. But freedom is the ability of a people to come together and be free to build the kind of society that they want, that's built on shared values and even kinship. Liberty, to quote the author, means separation, but freedom means connection. America is built on liberty. The whole premise of the United States of America is colonial chaffing at external control. The whole point of the United States of America is to build on the rights of the individual. That's why a capitalist country emerged from it. That's why a heteronymous population is attracted to it, because they all come to America to live their lives free from intrusion. The state of Israel was born in a very different narrative. It was not about liberty. It was about the Jewish people coming together back to their ancestral homeland, to live in freedom, to build the kind of just and Jewish society that they always dreamed of building. It's a very different project that's filled with a push towards the collective over the individual, that we need to build a certain kind of society. This difference between us is significant. While the countries obviously shift over time, Israel is now the startup nation and more capitalist, and we understand that. America deals with its own equality issues and how to form a more just society. This fundamental difference, that America is about the right of an individual to live his or her life as he or she wants, without government interference, versus Israel,
Okay.
which is not
So
about that.
Maybe you will give us more of a specific points on how to deal with this gap in the next round. I want to get to Dr. Shai, and I'm keeping our host to be the latest. נחמן, can I call you נחman? You very much aware of, and you are following and you are debating this issue of the connection with the Jewish diaspora in the Knesset, and I follow everything you say and write. And do you feel a change in the last probably, maybe even 2-3 years, a big change, and there isn't any sense of urgency within Israel?
There is no, thank you. There's no urge of sense of urgency in Israel, because Israelis do not care very much for this topic. In many surveys that we held, the number was between 3 to 4% of Israelis expressed any interest in this issue, which is obviously very small. Most of the Israelis, I would say, do not care. They take American Jewry and Jewry abroad for granted. They'll always be with us. They'll always help us. I would, by the way, test it soon if there's something happens between between us and Iran, for example, and a war, or hopefully not, but something will happen. I would follow very much how the American Jewry will react, and will it be similar to previous military campaigns? You said no.
No.
Okay. This is very sad to hear that from you, because in all past wars and military engagement between us and our enemies, the American Jews were first to stand with us, to raise money, to lobby, to go to Washington, and to make sure that at least America would stand next with Israel. I'm not sure it will repeat itself.
Well, we have the president to lobby for us right now.
This is a mistake. The American, yes, the president does, but the American president, this one and anyone is not eternal. And one day there'll be someone else in the White House. And one day there'll be a Democratic majority in the Congress. And that may be different. The very fact that somehow the government right now focusing on the president, I don't blame them. It works very well, I should say, and personally I'm happy. But at the same time, I'm asking myself, can we give up on the American Jewry, and can we give up on the Democratic Party in the United States? The answer is no. As a result of the Kotel issue and the conversion issue, these two, I would say, damage the relation between Israel and the diaspora Jews. Is still there. Nothing has happened, and it will continue to spoil the relations between us
But
and the
have you
American Jews.
seen the Wailing Wall, the Kotel issue, damaging the connection specifically, because when you travel to the Jewish communities in the United States and you ask them about, not all of the people know what we're talking about.
No.
And people here are thinking maybe the Kotel was so determined to the relationship, but it's...
In Israel, as I said before, most of the people do not care, and especially for the issue where the reforms or the conservative Jews will daven when they come to the Kotel. They don't understand it, they don't care. But if you travel in American Jewish communities, as we do, and we take groups of Knesset members going with us, with our caucus, and we create, I would say, events or discussions between local leaders and visiting Knesset members, the outcome is terrible. And our Knesset members are surprised and shocked from the reaction. And they don't understand why, because even on their schedule, it comes very low. They don't give a shit, I would say, most of them, for this issue. It's not really important for them, but
So-
it is extremely important to the American Jews.
Okay, so dear Ambassador Purusor, you know the American society so well, and you also know the British Jewish society. And, look at a person like Natalie Portman, who was supposed to be our biggest, ally, friend, our ambassador in wait, I don't know how to call it. And suddenly we are hit with this mega PR problem unexpectedly and quite insulting to the person who we chose as our prime minister, even if not all of us chosen him, but still he's the elected prime minister. I mean, she meant to insult him personally. How do you think that Israel should probably play it next with her generation?
So first and foremost, when we talk about Jews and the relationship between Israel and Jews, if our former president Shimon Peres would be here, he would say, נחman, the biggest contribution of Jews to the world is dissatisfaction. Have you ever seen a satisfied Jew? No. The problem is that this is a symbiotic relationship, okay? It's a symbiotic relationship where we have to enrich each other, support each other, and basically conduct a dialogue. Now, the problem is that the dialogue today, because of the generational gap, is completely different. Gallup poll shows you basically that the support for Israel of all, age beyond 55 is 80%. But between the ages of 18 to 34, the support is 31%. Why? Because the dialogue, conducts itself on anti-Semitism, the Shoah, and Gewalt, and it doesn't really speak to the new generation. And because this is a strategic issue for the state of Israel, why is it strategic? If we define Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, then it is strategic. So how do you engage? And my good colleague and friend, Nadav Tamir, and I'll coin the phrase which I connect to, he called it helps, like help with an additional S. What's the helps? It means create in the dialogue hope. Okay? The E is the issue of empathy in this dialogue. The L is listening, which we are not very good at, okay? And basically problem solving, and at the end of the day, self-critique. And he's absolutely right, because in the sense, those elements are really, really essential in this dialogue. And the problem is that we look at the Jewish diaspora from a prism that basically connects to us. Either you lobby for us, you give us money, or basically you support us. And that's nice, but okay, what is the solution? I can continue with the diagnosis, but what's the solution? The solution is to create new structures. Hence, if I am a Jew, anywhere else, and I'm interested in immigration, I want to connect to people in Israel that deal with immigration, okay? I don't need certain organizations in Israel to give them money to really do that for me. If I'm interested in LGBT, connect me to LGBT, okay? If I'm interested in preserving Jerusalem, connect me. There's enough in Israel, civic society, to really connect to Jews and connect them to what Israel is all about. And the bottom line out of this is that when I talk about structures, It's creating structures that do not have this issue of interest. So if I'm now the Ministry of Absorption, it's obvious that I'll talk about Aliyah. But if I create a structure, let's say theoretically, where the whole connection with the diaspora is under the President of the State of Israel, who's probably after politics, he doesn't have a real interest in trying to get something from someone, you create a structure that at the end of the day, can be different. And the mindset should be different. And the bottom line is that we don't have to shy away from seeing a new generation that doesn't really put Israel on first priority, but they are part of the family. And a family, in the sense, is a family. So you don't ask your brother, in most families, for money.
So you think that Israeli NGOs, civil NGOs, just need to go on an outreach or maybe a roadshow in order to pull in some Jewish young people?
Why not do a Jewish Peace Corps?
A Jewish what?
Peace Corps. Yeah. Create the structures that will allow us to connect to things that are really interesting for the new generation of Jews all around the world, and hence connect to our values. So the word tikkun olam, I wouldn't rule out, for example, a triangle where American, British Jews or French Jews with Israeli technology work in Africa. That's tikkun olam. They would connect to it because it really makes them proud of Israeli and Jewish values, where we can all be very proud of what Israel does.
Okay. I guess I want to hear more about it, because how do you do that? But I'll have to talk to the rest of the panel. I want to go a bit into the Chok HaGiyur, the conversion bill that actually may be on this Knesset schedule for this spring. And it will again try to limit or maybe put the scope of the conversion in the hands of a smaller group, the Orthodox only, and limit the steps that have been taken in the past couple of years to let some others handle the conversion. And obviously the political arena in Israel makes it for the ruling party, the Likud, have to submit to the wills of its coalition partners. And the political reality here is so that in order to get the coalition working, you have to agree to certain waivers. And this may deter or upset the Jewish diaspora all over again. So who wants to maybe Dr. Friedman, you will give us the way you look at it from the outside.
I'll talk about it from the inside, actually.
Okay.
About the lives of the individual young people, because it's, as everyone knows here, if you're involved in Jewish organizational life and you're mostly meeting with people like me, I'm on the AIPAC board, we all meet together, you get a different impression about what's really going on in American Jewish life. But as many of you said, it's with the young people. It's not that they're critical. Okay, they're really critical, some of them. It's that they don't care. It's just not an issue. And you have to also realize that in the American Jewish community, more than half of the families are intermarried families who have less interest in being involved in Jewish life. So we think that they're part of the family, but they don't think that they're part of the family. So you have to step back a little bit and take a look at what the problem with American Jewish life and what we need to do to refocus our energy as the leadership of the American Jewish community to increase Jewish identification and Jewish involvement among young people. We have failed dramatically.
So if a family has someone who is marrying with someone he or she met in college who is not Jewish, but as a parent you want to bring in and to help them, be part of the community, how do you do that?
If they want to be a part of the community, then the community has to learn to operate in a buyer's market and not a seller's market. We have to learn to be inclusive and to make people feel a part of us. And we want to be so inspiring and so wonderful and so meaningful to people that they choose to cast their lot with the Jewish people. Because in the American Jewish community, among young people, most of them do not care. It's not the central feature of their life. And as a result of that, they don't really care that much about Israel. So we have to start
But
in a different place.
When do you think is the intersection? When do we lose them? Is that through after bar mitzvah, in summer camps, in
No.
college, or
First of all-
where do you start to
First
lose
of all,
them?
only 15% of American Jews even belong to a synagogue. That's 1/5.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
15% of American Jews belong to a synagogue. So you're saying bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah? It's not meaningful to most people. So you have to start with a whole nother premise about what we need to do as an American Jewish community to inspire young people to find meaning in being Jewish. From that, a lot of other things flow. But because it's a choice in the United States now, and most American Jews are Reform Jews, and most American Jewish young people don't really care that much about being Jewish or about Israel. So that's really the biggest challenge, ultimately. There are other challenges too, but that's the responsibility of the American Jewish community. That's why we have such a problem on campuses, because these children, these young people, have such weak Jewish identities and so little connection as a result to Israel that one little wisp of anti-Semitic or anti-Israel wind, and they just fall over. They have no idea what to say. They have no idea how to respond. So that's the responsibility of the American Jewish community. I think Israel has a big responsibility too, because your people, your young people, and I spend a lot of time with them too, don't care that much about American Jews. I just did a session at a college here, and they said, we don't even understand why you give us money. Why do you care?
Okay, Rabbi Goldschmidt, how does it work in your communities?
I think that we have to understand that something happened. Why have things changed? The last, we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. Israel was always perceived as David against Goliath by diaspora Jews, the poor Jews who came from Eastern Europe, the Holocaust survivors, and we American Jews or European Jews, British Jews, we have to help them. We have to help them to survive. They say, who was a good Zionist? It's an American Jew giving to a British Jew money to help a Polish Jew to build a kibbutz in Israel. Now, Israel today is not a David. Israel today is the Goliath, is a superpower. You should look at how in Davos they treat the Israeli prime minister. There are only 6 or 7 heads of state who are being accorded the honor of speaking in the plenary of Davos, and one of them is the Prime Minister of Israel, even though Israel is a tiny, minuscule country. Israel today is perceived in the world, and also by Jews, as a powerful superpower. They don't need our help. Now, do we identify with them? Now, it used to be, when I was young, who were the heroes for diaspora Jews? It was the Israeli generals. It was the Mossad agent. It was a David fighting against Goliath. Who are today the heroes, the Israeli heroes for diaspora Jews? People like Natalie Portman, maybe, or maybe all these
authors,
startup techies,
high-tech,
who made Israel into an economic superpower, and maybe some human rights activists instead of Mossad agents in general. So there is a whole different perception, as Dr. Friedman said. Jews, American Jews, are becoming much less identified as Jews, much more secular. If it used to be that most American Jews were tied to some kind of religious movement, whether Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, today the majority of American Jews are not tied to any religious movement. And
but do you think the Israeli government or the Israeli Knesset should ease on the conversion in order to be more inclusive and have people who have maybe two identities, Jewish and non-Jewish, be part of the group and get back in? Is it something that should be on our agenda here, or strict rules that usually will probably leave huge groups out?
Right. The conversion issue is one of the most difficult issues which divides Israel itself, diaspora communities. I don't want to quote any religious authority. I just want to quote my good friend. I think he's the biggest or most important Jewish expert in Jewish statistics today, Professor de la Pergola. And I asked him the question about conversion, about Giyur. What is your opinion about Giyur in general? Is a more liberal Giyur, is this going to help us fight assimilation or not? And he answered me the following way. If you look at the statistics in the first generation, and it says if you go to a more liberal Giyur, which doesn't have all the demands of Shmirat Mitzvot, etc., so yes, it helps. But if you go further, after one generation, it just has the opposite effect. So I see it, Giyur, as a double-edged sword. From one side, we have, let's say in Italy, in Europe, we had communities which are extremely liberal in terms of conversion. The mother state Catholics, and we just converted the children. And communities disappeared. Communities disappeared this way. So I think that conversion is an issue which, from one side, unites the Jewish people, because we have to make sure that we bring in everyone who belongs to a Jewish community. And from the other side, we're having the survival of Jewish communities in the diaspora at stake, as well as of Israel. So I don't think it's an easy issue to solve.
Okay. Dr. Berman, maybe you can relate to that and also to the issue of the Kotel, which also causes a rift.
Well, I think the key point is to understand that Israel is not the problem, Israel is the solution. And the problem, as Dr. Friedman said, is about Jewish identity or the lack of importance of Jewish identity in American Judaism.
Do you suggest that all Jews should just come live here?
First of all,
As you did.
I am a Toshav. I also certainly suggest encourage Aliyah. But I don't just mean that. But it is important that I speak as a dual citizen, meaning I'm also, besides being the president of Yeshiva University, I lived in Israel for 10 years. I'm the proud father of 2 IDF soldiers, and understand the context of both societies. And I can tell you this, okay, there's nothing that inspires American Jews, even young American Jews, like the state of Israel. Okay, if you look at birthright and look at their numbers, there's something that happens 10 days. It takes 10 days for a child, a student, to come to the state of Israel, 10 days, and comes out and says, it changed my life. Now, whether it actually changes their life or not in the long run is a good question.
It's quite contradicting to what we just heard, that it's the people are impressed, but there are a very small percentage of them that are being impressed and are being pulled in order to...
If they're here, that's the difference. The difference is if they experience Israel or not. If they have a chance to experience Israel, it could be transformative. And I have to tell you that Israelis sometimes don't appreciate this. I mean this very seriously. It's a wonderful idea to take Jews to Africa and to have them come together. I'm certainly in favor. It's a wonderful thing. There is nothing like Jews coming together in the state of Israel. When you are an American Jew and you get off that plane, and for the first time in your life, again, you take this all for granted, but for the first time in your life, you have your symbols be the nation's symbols. You have your family, the people on the street feel like your family. You have a culture that's vibrant and that identifies with you, that your story is their story. For the first time in your life, you feel like you belong somewhere.
And how do you reach the outer circle, to those people who do not send their kids to Taglit, or to those people who are not connected to any synagogue or any activity, or those people who just intermarried and they're having problems because their spouse is unable to be brought in?
It's a wonderful question. I'm not saying it solves there's a massive problem of assimilation. It's not the latchkey that will solve everything. But it's important to contextualize the issue, which is if the problem is the lack of Jewish identity, and one of the key solutions is the state of Israel, which has wholeheartedly, clearly shown itself to be true, the question is, how do you make the state of Israel more accessible to these people? The problem with conversion and with the Kotel, with these issues, is that it makes Israel look like a theocracy. It makes it something that they're not interested in. Not that Israel's chasing them away. They're away. But it limits Israel's potential of actually bringing them back. That's why I started off by saying in their head what a country's supposed to be doing is staying out of religion and staying out of the way they practice. And then they see what Israel's doing, and it makes them feel like it's a theocracy. It's not part of them. The irony is the very thing that makes them feel like it's a theocracy is what attracts them to Israel. It's because Israel's a Jewish nation and is not America and the Middle East. They wouldn't be interested in America and the Middle East. They already have America and it's not working. They want to come to Israel, or they don't even know this, but when they come to Israel and experience what it's like to be in a Jewish country, to touch the kotel for the first time, the electricity, if you speak to birthright kids, and people without a background who touch the kotel for the first time, the electricity that they feel, or experience Shabbat for the first time when the whole city becomes more peaceful and more quiet. There's something magical about this country and about this people. We need to understand it and appreciate it. Israelis need to understand it and appreciate it and use it to help the greater good.
Dr. Shai, maybe you will go a little bit into, maybe you can go a little bit into the politics and explain to us, as one of the opposition main fighters, how do you plan to proceed? We have in this coming Knesset session some religious issue that's going to be on the table as a fight.
Well, the best solution is to change the government. I mean, that's the
Doesn't
first,
seem like you're
that's
heading.
the first step.
Doesn't seem like you're heading that way.
Not necessarily. Well, we never lose hope, right? Jewish way is never lose hope. But seriously, we've been trying to build bridges through the Knesset, through the young generation of Israeli politicians, within the Knesset and out of the Knesset.
Maybe you can speak to the mic.
Yeah, to make them much more involved and being aware of the American Jewish community. And issues like that, of course, meeting each other is great and helps a lot, but it's not the end of it. They should play a role in the Knesset, especially the Orthodox ones, or those who are coming from the right wing should lead the campaign within the Knesset to build new relations between us and Jews in the diaspora. They have the key because they are in the government. They are in the coalition. But what we are faced with is that the ultra-Orthodox are leading the relations between Israel and the diaspora Jews because they insist on
But this
not
is going to
making
happen
any
if
concessions.
you're going to be in government as well. So
One day we will,
but this is not going to change if and we know it from the past, when the Labor or the Machaneh Tzioni will be in power, you will have to submit to the Orthodox in order to keep them in.
Yeah, I know. Well, that option doesn't exist right now. But seriously, one day it will. But seriously, I feel that especially the ultra-Orthodox and the right-wing members of the Knesset, they have the power right now. And they should be aware of the fact that we are losing a significant part of the Jewish people. In our generation, intermarriage is going fast. And as you said, over half of 50%. We know about over 70% of the marriages are interfaith.
You think they don't know the numbers? They do.
They do know
It's
the
on
number, and
the
they
table.
ignore it. They ignore it. And next generation, it's not too far, we will have no Jews in America to support Israel any longer. They will lose their contacts with Israel, their relations with Israel, their sympathy with Israel, solidarity. Maybe you don't believe me, but I'm telling you, right now, it's still viable, but in a very short time, we lose them. And I think it's so strategically, it's important to Israel. This is the issue of this discussion, strategic relations.
Ron, Mr. Ambassador, there was one suggestion to put the the Israeli-Jewish diaspora relationship as a matter of the country, in the country Koret, תפיסת הביטחון, in the, how do you say?
Security.
National security, as actually a written component of Israel national security defense agenda. How do you put it into words, and what is there isn't any תפיסת ביטחון written anywhere. So how do you come from just, talking about concepts and talking about, theoretically in an academic manner, into the real world of this Israeli government, who is very busy with so many things?
No, but I don't think it's really an issue of government X or government Y. And I connect to Berman in the sense Israel is the solution, okay? And the question is, how do you connect this solution? Because birthright is correct. The minute you bring people here with all the critique and all the problems, people connect to really being in a collective in the nation state of the Jewish people. And I can tell you as an ambassador, every ambassador can tell you, it doesn't make a difference, I think. And this is very unique. You don't have it in any foreign ministry. An Israeli ambassador that goes out abroad automatically has someone that reaches out to him It can be in the Ukraine, it could be in the US or the United Kingdom or France. It basically shows him around, connects him to the people, and the connection is with the eye and with the heart before you even know anything else, because this is part of being Jewish. And I think Israel represents such an amazing enterprise that the fact that we focus only on, what is bad, because this is part of our character, we are losing out here. And I would say that, yes, Anita is right. Maybe we should, connect more Israelis to what it means to understand better Jewish diaspora in the United Kingdom or the United States. And that's true, because in Israel there's not so much interest in that. But I think it's more important that they come here and basically experience the Israeli experience.
Yes, please.
If I may add, based on what was said by Anita and Rabbi Berman and Knesset member Nachman and Ambassador Purcell, yes, Israel is the solution, but for Israel to be the solution, Israel has to stop looking at the diaspora as a funders and lobbyists, but Israel, strong Israel, greater Israel, should come and say, we're going to now help diaspora Jews survive by providing for education, helping schools, and the school system, I think, is a very crucial part of Jewish identity anywhere in the world. We saw this in England and South Africa and France, much less so in the United States. And the moment the United States comes in and said that it is a question for national security to make sure to keep the Jewish identity of Jews outside of Israel. I remember when Yitzhak Rabin came to visit Russia for the first time in 1994. He came to the Koret synagogue, and there was a question if when the Soviet Union fell apart, is it worthwhile to invest in Jewish education? And then Mendel Kaplan, the head of the Jewish Agency, said, we're not going to create a new diaspora. And I told back then Prime Minister Rabin, if there is no Jewish education, there will be no Jews. If there are no Jews, there's not going to be any aliyah. And that's when the Israeli government changed its policy. And I think today, more than ever, 20 years later, this question of keeping Jewish identity, the solution is here in Israel.
Thank you. I wanted to go into the role of the Israeli who are living in places like San Francisco area, but I see maybe we have just a little bit more time to hear about that, or can I take questions from the audience? Yeah? Okay, just one question.
Almost says no.
לא? אין שאלות. So,
Can I?
Yes.
maybe you could speak up.
Louder than this?
Yes.
I'm an American Jew, an American Reconstructionist rabbi, born bat mitzvah's kids, whose many times their mothers are Jewish, many times their fathers. This is on both the Reform and Reconstruction movement in the United States.
Okay,
70% of Americans.
my mistake.
70% of American Jews, 75% consistently vote liberal and democratic. And what you have not discussed at all is the fact that the Prime Minister of Israel, current Prime Minister of Israel, comes to the United States and publicly advocates for the Republican Party, and thereby antagonizes American Jews. And that's a big part of what the problem.
Well, that was at the beginning of
No,
the
it's
panel,
not, but,
but
this is worth a discussion.
I'm being told here that we have to
Yeah.
close down the panel. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for the question.
Thank
תודה.
you.